A billionaire father believes marriages are spreadsheets with rings. A famous actress believes love is a camera angle, and a housemaid believes dignity pays late, but pays. This is the night. A son was supposed to propose to a star, and instead chose the girl who mopped his family's marble. Before we begin, please rate this story from 0 to 10 in the comments and say why. Then lean in, because the elevator is already rising and the floor is about to drop. Picture glass so high the clouds argue with it. Hale Tower. The penthouse smells like orchids, old money, and a publicist's panic. Staff move in quiet choreography, polishing the same surfaces twice because powerful people hear fingerprints. Mina Alvarez, 24, brown ponytail tucked under a scarf, rubber soles whispering, is pushing a cleaning cart past a wall of mirrors that multiply her into an army of girls who make other people's shine happen. She keeps her eyes on the wheels, not the view. Girls like her are allowed to stare at streaks, not horizons. Tonight is not just any party. It's the corporate charity gala with a hidden agenda, a live taped engagement between Julian Hale, heir, CFO, cool as a winter window, and Serafina Lux, actress, perfume contract, fame that knows its light. Victor Hale, the father and chairman, orchestrated it like he orchestrates hostile takeovers. Smile first, squeeze later. The theme is a night for tomorrow's artists, which is a poetic way of saying the company wants tax write-offs and applause. Mina checks a smudge on a marble column that cost more than her yearly rent, rubs it away with the tenderness of someone who knows what 10 minutes on a clock means in tips. She's thinking about her brother Nico rehearsing his violin in a tiny apartment down in Oak Ridge, about how the sound bounces off thin walls and still insists on being music. She's thinking about the envelope on her fridge tuition due, and the note from a landlord who thinks politeness is a hobby. She is not thinking about the elevator. The doors open like a verdict. Out steps Julian, tie loosened, jaw set in that expensive neutrality. Rich men learn to survive rooms that want too much from them. He nearly collides with the cart, stops it with careful hands, not with the bark the head housekeeper uses. Their eyes meet in the little no man's land between apology and blame. For half a breath, the penthouse goes quiet in Mina's head. He's taller up close. He looks surprised to see an actual person at the end of a polished hallway. Sorry, he says automatically, then less automatically. I should watch where I'm going. It's okay, Mina answers, because girls like her are taught to forgive gravity in the mouths of men. She moves the cart aside. A bottle of eco-friendly cleaner rattles like a nervous cousin. Julian notices the label, biodegradable, purchased by Mina with her own discount, because the company prefers industrial strength that erases smells and sometimes lungs. He looks like a person deciding to say something real and then choosing survival instead. Have a good night, he offers, the bland farewell of people on cliffs. A cough of laughter pierces the air. Yara, the house manager, glides up in black silk with a clipboard that could cut feelings. Alvarez, she says, without looking at Mina, that cart should have been in service corridor C 15 minutes ago. Try moving, like we pay you by the hour, and not by the century. We get paid by the hour, Mina says, under her breath. Yara's smile sharpens. Not if you keep talking, dear. Julian opens his mouth, closes it. He has learned the choreography of rich sons. Do not embarrass staff by rescuing them. He keeps walking. Mina pushes the cart. The chandelier above them is a galaxy designed by a person who never had to change a light bulb. By 7, the guests bloom. Diamonds smell faintly of hairspray and high hopes. Cameras arrive with their handlers. Serafina Lux floats in with a dress that owns the room and a voice like champagne thinking about being wine. She kisses Victor Hale on both cheeks, leaving a glint of gloss like territorial flags. We're ready for our moment, she coos. I brought the media. You brought the money. The city will bring the applause. Victor's smile is the superpower that bought 3 continents and a senator. You'll love the ring, he says. Custom, timeless, like the story. Has Julian seen it? Serafina asks, feigning innocence that never saw a mirror it didn't approve. He trusts me, Victor replies. He always has. He will. Julian stands by the window, watching a city he won't let himself belong to. He holds a champagne flute by its stem, like it might bite. He did not choose this. He chose spreadsheets, mergers that made sense in his bones, mirrorless numbers. He did not choose to sell himself as a headline, for a dowry, disguised as a charity pledge. But Victor's voice is a place. Sonhood goes to avoid drowning. You owe it to the company, it says, without saying. To your mother's memory, it says, with a portrait. His mother, whose laughter used to sound like wind in curtains, died when he was 19. Victor built a shrine out of expectation and wrote duty in the dust. Mina moves like a rumor, present where mess gathers. A guest spills red wine. She appears with seltzer and a white cloth. Dab, don't rub, she instructs gently, and the hedge funder blinking at her obeys, as if she's a queen, disguised as a maid. She doesn't watch the balcony where Serafina poses, but she hears the murmurs. Any minute now, breathes a woman, adjusting her diamonds like a collar. He's going to do it. It was about time, a man snorts. Bachelors are only charming before 40. In the kitchen, a prep cook slices figs with the concentration of a saint restringing a rosary. Mina wipes a counter, checks a tray, hums the line of a melody she stole from Nico's practice last night. You sing? A passing server asks. She shakes her head. Only in cash, she says. And this isn't that kind of night. At 9, a hush travels the marble. It looks like heat at a distance, but it's power. Victor lifts a hand. The strings pause. A production crew mails the room into a stage. Friends, Victor begins, camera ready. Tonight we celebrate art, future, community. We also celebrate something timeless, partnership. He gestures. Serafina glides to the center of the floor, like a perfect sentence. Julian steps forward, every molecule of him screaming, nowhere anyone can hear. Then it happens. Not the engagement. Not yet. A tray tilts. A glass slips. It's only a splash. A dark comet arcing toward a dress, less expensive than the apology it will require. Mina moves without thinking, catching the glass midair, twisting her wrist so the spill dies on a napkin, and not a hem. People gasp. Someone laughs. The camera catches the moment for a B-roll of grace under pressure. Serafina stares at Mina with that gentle cruelty actresses, where to set boundaries. Thank you, she says brightly. Could you not be in the shot? The room laughs in that nervous way rooms do when they've been told what humor to choose. Of course, Mina says, stepping back into the invisibility that keeps rent close and trouble closer. Victor raises his voice slightly, the way he does when orders are disguised as invitations. Julian, this is when the ring should appear. This is when the sun does what suns do in empires that have their own weather. He reaches inside his jacket, feels velvet like a mistake. He looks toward the kitchen, not at Mina, but somehow through the space she just left, and something treacherous in him says, "Live." I can't, he says, not loud, but honest. The kind of honest that sound crews hate. The silence lands like a dropped chandelier. Serafina's face transforms so smoothly, it's almost art. Victor's smile freezes in the way ice does, right before it cracks. Don't be quaint, Victor chuckles, the sound of a man who always gets his way, wanting to stay that way. Our guests are waiting. Then they can eat, Julian answers, setting the velvet back in his pocket. I'm not auctioning my life to float a quarterly. The room tries to decide whether this is a performance. Serafina decides first. She reaches for his hand, with just enough pressure to look like love and feel like law. Baby, she breathes, both syllables PR tested. We discussed this. You discussed while I listened, he replies. The microphone, hungry for chaos, catches it. The hashtag is born before the dessert. Victor's tone drops its sugar. You will do your duty, he says, not bothering with metaphor. You will secure this alliance, and we will never have this conversation again. Mina, at the edge of the room with a tray of clean flutes, watches a father try to turn a son into an employee with a blood bonus. She shouldn't watch. She can't stop. Julian, who has built an internal life of compliance, feels something inside him stand on a chair and shout. He turns, not to his father, not to the cameras, but toward the hall where staff disappear and reappear like necessary ghosts. He sees a girl with a tray and a spine. He says, without planning it, I won't marry a brand. You'll marry a woman, Victor says smoothly, who will make this family stronger. Julian's mouth tilts. Then I'll marry the one who already does that. His eyes find Mina's before his sense does. He says her name like a question and a map. Mina. 3 things happen in one breath. The room inhales like a flock. Yara's clipboard tilts. Mina's heart trips and then runs a lap. She nearly laughs at the absurdity, at the tenderness with a death wish. No, she says instantly, because she loves her job more than any fairy tale. No, Mr. Hale, I work here. Serafina smiles sweetly enough to ulcer a stone, and we appreciate that, she says, turning to face the nearest camera. Every story needs its helpers. The kindness is a knife. Victor's eyes do the math of cruelty. He steps forward just enough to make a shadow. Alvarez, he says, voice even. The service hall is that way. Mina nods, because she knows where exits live. She walks into the hallway with the tray balanced and dignity precarious. Julian takes one step after her and stops, because heirs don't chase. The cameras, thwarted, return to what they were promised. A woman who can cry on cue, and a man who can make checks look like love. Serafina handles the room with a hand light as theft. We'll give him a moment, she says, into the nearest lens, confiding what will be the clip they run. He's under so much pressure, but love is patient. She kisses Victor's cheek like a signature. In the service corridor, Mina leans against a wall painted the color of compromise. Her pulse drums. She counts to 5 the way she does when a pan catches quickly. Yara appears first, fury hidden in professionalism. You will forget what you just heard, she says without preamble. You will sign this reminder of your confidentiality, and you will not so much as breathe a rumor. If a single syllable leaves your mouth, every building with a chandelier will be closed to you. I'm not a gossip, Mina says. I'm a cleaner. Yara's mouth twitches. Everyone is a gossip when the table is set the right way. She leans in. If you like your paycheck, Alvarez, you will not be seen. Julian finds them then, violating 3 codes at once. He's in the service corridor. He followed a staffer, and he looks like he owns exactly none of this hallway. He stops at a respectful distance, which is how you talk to someone you've just dragged into weather. I'm sorry, he says to Mina first. The corridor hears and blinks. Yara goes statue still. Don't be, Mina answers, because she will not be the thing that makes him smaller. You didn't do anything to me. I kind of did, he confesses, half smile crooked and tired. He looks at Yara. Give us a minute. Sir, Yara says, making the syllable mean many things, the least of which is sir. It's fine, Mina says, because she refuses to be fought over. I was leaving anyway. Julian breathes like a man who has forgotten to, since he was 19. My father thinks marriage is a strategy, he says. He wants an actress he can stage. I want not to be a product. What you want is irrelevant if you're asking in a hallway, Mina says gently. People will eat you alive and call it canapes. He laughs once, and it sounds like a window opening in winter. You're right.
I'm at work, she adds, because truth has to be boring before it's brave. And you're at a party. She moves past him. He doesn't reach out, which she notices in the place women notice safety. Back in the ballroom, Victor has reasserted weather. The ring materializes, diamond like a headline. Serafina holds out her hand the way you hold out a passport. For the cameras, Victor murmurs. Julian stands in front of 2 lives, each with flashing lights. He looks at his father, and then at the staff door, and chooses civil war. No, he says again, louder, for the microphones. I'm not proposing tonight. He pockets the ring, which has never felt heavier. If I propose to anyone, it will be because I love her, not because your board needs an actress to keep a merger warm. Someone claps. It might be a cater. It might be courage. Victor's smile becomes a blade. We'll discuss this privately, he says, which is code for punishment. He turns to the cameras. We're postponing this sweet moment, he says smoothly. We want to ensure family can be present. He does not say which family. He does not say present for what. Serafina takes it like a pro, because she is one. She touches Julian's arm, lets her face crumble, just enough to trend, then releases on cue. I understand, she breathes. We are so happy for the charities tonight, she tells a reporter, and the charity checks fatten on cue to anesthetize gossip. Mina signs out with the slow pen of exhaustion. Locker room, scrubs into street. The city at 11 is a different animal, less performance, more teeth. She walks to the bus stop and counts steps, because numbers don't lie. Her phone buzzes, a text from Nico. How's the palace? She writes back shiny and loud. Be home soon. Bring earplugs. She closes her eyes for 1 stop. 2 wakes to a notification she does not want. A push alert on a gossip app with a photo where she is a blur behind a star. MAID in the middle. Who needs reality when captions exist? When she reaches Oak Ridge, the hallway smells like frying and the sweet sag of linoleum. Nico is on the sofa with his violin in his lap, asleep under a hoodie. She tucks a blanket around him, checks the window latch, turns the kettle on the cheap stove. The kettle hums a song her mother used to hum while scrubbing floors in a hotel that never knew her name. Mina takes off her scarf and stares at her face in the dark reflection of a microwave. A girl looks back who can do 3 shifts without shaking and still find joy in steam. She laughs once at herself. Don't be stupid, she tells the girl in the microwave. He is a world in a suit. Morning finds Hale Tower with a hangover and a plan. Victor sits at the head of a table that makes men feel like islands. He flips a contract like a card trick. We contain this, he says. We lean into romance. He taps the table. Serafina signs a 3-month private engagement agreement with a non-disclosure. We do a soft focus profile. We bleed out the boy's disobedience into a narrative about mental health and pressure. We save our partners from uncertainty and meet. Julian asks, not bothering to seat his fury. You will apologize to Miss Lux. Victor says, you will take her to dinner. You will sign. If you refuse, your equity vests freeze. Your pet projects lose funding. The scholarship fund your mother started. It pauses. You will learn that I can love you and still correct you. Julian feels 19 again, standing in a hospital in a suit that didn't fit, signing forms that said son because nobody knew what else to write. He looks at his father and sees a man who has replaced grief with structure. If you touch my mother's scholarship, he says, voice quiet, I burn you to the ground. Victor laughs. It is not joy. You'll do no such thing. You don't even know where the matches are. Julian walks into the hall and finally realizes he can ask someone who does. He finds Mina on the 24th floor, 2 hours before the lunch service, polishing the brass until it reflects a better person. She looks up and then down and then decides not to be smaller than a moment deserves. If you're here to apologize, she says, I accept, and I mean it. If you're here to ask me to be a prop, no. I'm here to ask for a map, he says. How do people like you? He stops, tries again. How do people who weren't born with keycards survive men like my father? We don't, she says. We outlast them. She sets the cloth down. You want me to teach you to be brave and poor? Pass. He smiles despite the mourning. I want you to teach me to be brave and useful.
Mina studies him for a long, impolite second. Useful how? She asks. Serafina and my father have a contract to turn me into a photo, he says. They think charity is a theater prop and marriage is a sponsor. I want to take their plan apart without lighting the building on fire. You ask the cleaning staff for demolition advice, she says, half amused. Smart. It seemed right, he says. She glances around to make sure Yara isn't hovering like consequence. You can't win his game, she says. Make him play yours. Find the one thing he can't buy and build your case around it. What can't he buy? Julian asks. He thinks he can buy everything. Time, she says. He can't buy more time. You can slow him down while you build truth. You can refuse every camera. You can show up where his image doesn't matter. She picks up the cloth again, and you can make friends with the people who see everything. Like you, he says. She nods toward the freight elevator. Like Mr. Esteban, she says. Night porter. He's been here since Hale Tower had carpet that squeaked. He knows where paper lives when it's not ready to be seen. Mr. Esteban is 60, compact, and knows how to fold a story into a shrug. He looks at Julian with the sorrow and amusement of someone who's mocked after better parties. So you discovered gravity, he says. Congratulations, it's kept me busy. He pours coffee into paper cups, hands one to Mina, one to Julian. You want receipts, he says to Julian. And I want a world where my granddaughter can breathe without your PR turning her into a headline. He lifts a ring of keys like a small planet. There's a storage room behind the AV suite. Victor keeps old contracts there because he doesn't think anyone knows paper can betray him. They go. The hallway smells like old carpet and secrets. Inside the storage room, plastic bins line metal shelves like archived sins. Mina holds the flashlight. Julian flips through folders with hands that learned balance on different ledgers. He finds it a draft lifestyle partnership agreement with Serafina Lux dated months before the gala, payment schedules disguised as brand alignment, a clause granting Victor veto power over the actress's roles during the term. He finds a memo about cultural optics, recommending the use of a labor origin narrative to soften Julian's image. Translation. Stage photos with staff. His name sits next to a strategy to strip him of self. Mina's breath catches, a little betrayal of distance. They were going to borrow people like me, she says. To launder you. They already borrowed me, Julian says. I signed the family long ago. A door handle rattles. Voices. Mina turns off the light. They hold still as grammar. Yara's voice slices through like a paper cut. We'll need the AV room cleared for a call at noon, she tells someone. The someone replies, Yes, Miss Voss. Footsteps recede. The three in the storage room breathe like thieves of the right things. Back in the quiet, Mr. Esteban closes the file with careful fingers. You need a lawyer who isn't afraid of your father's Christmas list, he says, and a timeline that doesn't look like panic. He nods at Mina. You also need a witness who can tell the truth without dramatics. I didn't witness anything, Mina says quickly. I didn't see contracts. You saw enough, Mr. Esteban answers. You saw who they are. Julian pockets the copies like contraband. Thank you, he tells Esteban. He looks at Mina. And thank you for not letting me be an idiot in public last night. You did okay, she says. It's hard to be brave when the floor wants you to bow. He smiles. Will you? He stops because he remembers her clause about not being a prop and his promise to himself not to be a man who asks women to fix his weather. He switches lanes. Will you let me walk you home after your shift? Only if you bring no cameras and good shoes, she says. Not saving him, just setting rules. and keep 2 arms distance. Deal, he says too quickly, then slows. Deal. The day turns into an obstacle course. Victor schedules a press conference to clarify rumors. Serafina posts a soft focus photo with the caption "Grace's patience" and an angle that makes tears look like diamonds. The board sends a concerned email that feels like an audit. Yara tells the staff there will be enhanced protocols for service entrances, which is corporate for "we're about to make your shift longer and pretend it's for safety." On the Oak Ridge bus that night, Mina sits by the window while Julian stands because he doesn't deserve a seat he didn't grow up explaining. He holds the pole like an apology. The bus smells like people trying. A child falls asleep against his father's shoulder and the father pretends he wasn't crying 2 stops ago. Julian studies the map above the windshield and sees a city built by choices no one with a penthouse was ever forced to make. They walk the last 6 blocks under streetlights that flicker like budgets. "My father will come for you," Julian says, honesty tasting like metal. "He'll call your boss. He'll pretend to be polite. He'll make the building forget your face. I can stop some of it, not all. I've been erased before," Mina says. It didn't work. At her door he stops. "May I?" he starts, and then laughs at himself. "Not kiss you. Just, may I ask you not to give up on me when this gets worse?" "You're very dramatic for a CFO," she says. "But yes, if you behave." "How do I behave?" he asks. "Like someone who knows the difference between a hallway and a choice," she answers, and steps inside. He stands for a second in the stairwell that smells like rice and rain, then tells himself the truth and goes home to a tower that smells like orchids and orders. Victor meets him at the door with a pen and bad news. Serafina's team is playing hardball, he says. They want confirmation of a proposal date or they walk. "I told them we'll announce by Friday." "Tell them to walk," Julian says. Victor studies his son like a market he doesn't understand anymore. "You know," he says, voice softer, which is somehow worse. "I did not build this company to watch you make it small with your heart." "I know," Julian replies. "You built it to keep from being small with yours." Victor's face changes for a blink. The man under the chairman, the father under the architect. It closes. "You have 48 hours to remember you're my son," he says, and leaves a pen on the table like a threat and a lifeline. Julian picks up the pen and writes not his name on a contract but a list. First, lawyer. Second, board ally who values lungs over likes. Third, staff witness who can't be bullied. Fourth, a story that starves the machine. Fifth, ask Mina what to do when your father decides you are a storm he can outlast. Down in Oak Ridge, Mina counts tips, counts blessings, counts minutes, until Nico's recital the next night at a community center with flickering lights and reliable applause. She pulls a dress from the back of the closet, irons it with the careful heat of people who can't afford do-overs. She texts Yara for the next week's schedule and gets a passive-aggressive reply that reads like a test. She rolls her shoulders. "Bring it," she tells the universe, and the universe takes notes. The recital smells like dust and hope. Nico plays the second piece with a tremble at the start and grace at the end, the way courage actually happens. Mina claps with a face that hurts from smiling. She doesn't see Julian slip into the back row because he has learned to sneak into rooms that aren't made for headlines. He stands with arms crossed, not to look cool but to hold himself together. After, in the hallway of congratulatory cookies and paper cups, Mina spots him and almost rolls her eyes. "Do you think there's a camera in the coat rack?" she asks, half joke. "Not one I brought," he says, hand up. "I came to listen." Nico appears, bowing to a friend like a comic prince. "Is that," he whispers, and then stops composing sentences because starched shirts and suits make him nervous. "Hi," he says to Julian, small but brave. "You look like the posters in the subway." "I look worse," Julian says. "Posters don't have pores." Nico laughs despite himself. Mina watches both of them with the calculating affection of a sister who knows invoices. "We have to go," she says. "Our bus likes to flirt with schedules."
I can drive you, Julian offers, then corrects himself. Or I can walk behind you from a respectful distance like security without credentials. You can carry the cookies, Mina says. If you drop them, you owe me the whole tray. On the sidewalk under a streetlight that buzzes like a plan, Mina's phone buzzes louder. A message from an unknown number. You like being in the middle. Try unemployed. She shows Julian not to be saved but to be informed. He's starting, Julian says. Or someone eager to impress him is. Good, Mina says, surprising him. Then we know where we are in the story. Where's that? He asks. The part before the twist, she answers, handing him the cookies like a baton. He takes them with both hands. The night smells like rain, deciding whether to happen. Upstairs in Hale Tower, Victor drafts a press release in his head that tastes like sugar and iron. Across town, Serafina practices a cry in a mirror that will photograph like mercy. In the service corridor, Yara sharpens her clipboard. In the storage room, folders wait like matches. Mina locks the door to Oak Ridge 3B, sets the cookies down, turns off the lamp, and hears the city settle into the kind of quiet that isn't peace. Exactly, more like breath caught before confession. She washes her hands. She sets her alarm. She dreams of a building where mirrors reflect people and not props. In the morning, she'll push a cart past a wall of portraits that never blink. A man who grew up in those frames will decide in a heartbeat that smells like cleaner and coffee, whether to be an heir or a person. And somewhere between a marble column and a storage room with a ring of keys, a maid will teach a boss's son how to make mess into map. By morning, the city wears its disapproval like a gray scarf. Victor's press team floods the feeds with sugar. Family prioritizes privacy. Love takes time. And behind the sugar comes the blade. A blind item on a gossip site about a staffer with an agenda. A memo to Hale Tower managers about tightening discretion. And an email to Yara from legal reminding her that service areas must remain off limits to non-essential personnel, which is a pretty way of saying keep him away from her. Mina arrives early anyway because Rent doesn't read memos. She slips on gloves, ties her scarf, and begins the pilgrimage of smudges. Brass glass human fingerprints that think they won't be seen. She tries to file last night under fantasy in the storage room under caution. She fails because memory is sticky where fear is involved.
Yara stations herself by the staff clock, like a bouncer with a degree. Alvarez, she says. No hello. You're reassigned to sub-basement maintenance until further notice. Deep storage. Service stairs only. The punishment sings in polite key. Out of sight. Out of mind. Out of job if she protests. Mina hears the threat and chooses the narrow path that keeps paychecks breathing. Copy, she says, and swallows the acid of pride. The service stairs smell like bleach and resignation. She hums Nico's recital piece, because music is a rebellion no one can dock you for. Julian spends the morning on phones that pretend to be conversations. Serafina's agent leaves 3 messages, each increasingly maternal, each laced with the promise that public forgiveness sells out faster than popcorn. A board member texts a photo of a golf course captioned, "Pick your battles like holes." His lawyer, new, unafraid, recommended by Beatrice, from a previous life where truth liked suits, watches the copies from the storage room and whistles low. This isn't an engagement, she says. It's a purchase order. Can I blow it up? He asks. Not yet, she says. The first blast will be called hysteria. We build a fuse with witnesses and boring facts. Boring is bulletproof. At lunch, Victor holds a staff town hall that isn't and stands behind a lectern in a conference room that could double as a cold storage. We value our people, he intones, and any implication otherwise is a misinterpretation of isolated documents taken out of context. He says, misinterpretation like a threat and context like a tarp. During the Q&A, pre-screened, pre-sanitized, Mr. Esteban raises a hand that didn't get pre-cleared and asks, "Do you still know the name of the woman who polished the boardroom table the day you signed your first billion?" Victor blinks. Of course, he lies. Esteban nods once, as if checking a box labeled "Gravity Confirmed." By evening, the internet has chewed through its appetizer and wants a meal. A clip surfaces, Mina in profile by the freight elevator, handing cookies to a child backstage at the gala, captioned "Angel, staffer seeking spotlight." The comments split into the usual tribes: those who don't tip preaching about propriety, those who have never apologized, demanding public penance, those who are tired offering tired compassion that still counts. Mina closes the app, puts her phone face down in her locker, and touches the taped photo of Nico tucking his violin under his chin. She breathes like someone standing on an invisible bridge. Julian breaks the rules and finds the sub-basement anyway. He arrives not as heir, but as a man holding 2 thermoses and a bag that smells like sandwiches. He doesn't call her name. He doesn't want to make her complicit. He leaves the bag by the foot of the service stairs with a note: "No cameras, no heroics, just fuel, Jay." He starts up the stairs and hears her voice float from the pipe room, in that register she uses when she doesn't have the energy to pretend she's invisible. "You don't have to feed me," she says. He turns. She's there, sleeves rolled, hair pinned, a smudge on her cheek that refuses to belong to anyone else's narrative. "I have to try to be useful," he says. "I am very bad at sub-basements." "Then you're teachable," she answers, and accepts the thermos with a nod that feels like a truce. In Oak Ridge, Nico's landlord tapes a notice on their door, a courtesy reminder that subletting is prohibited and unauthorized guests incur fees, a word that means threats with receipts. Mina takes a photo for Beatrice, who replies in under a minute with a template letter that tastes like dignity. Mina copies it out by hand, because neatness is a spell. "I am not subletting, I am living. Any further attempts to harass me for existing will be considered retaliation. Sincerely, Rent." Serafina, to her credit, is not a cartoon. She meets Julian at a corner table in a restaurant that knows how to seat famous faces without making them feel like exhibits. She arrives in oversized glasses and underdone makeup, which is to say, she arrives as a person and not a brand. "I hate this," she says, before the waiter can do the dance. "I hate being a weapon." Julian wants to dislike her. It would be simpler. "We were both cast," he says. "Some of us with better lighting." She admits something that looks like a bruise. "My last film underperformed, and my brand deals run on illusions. Your father offered stability. I told myself I could steer it. Then I tried on the ring in the bathroom, and realized I was about to sell a part of me I'll need later." She laughs without joy. "Do you know what's funny? I'll take your word for it," he says. "Your maid is the most honest person in this story," Serafina says. "The camera loves that. It also resents it." "She isn't my maid," he says, heat in his throat. "No one is anyone's maid." "Good," she says softly. "Hold on to that. Men like your father recruit nouns and turn them into adjectives." After dinner, Serafina texts him a screenshot of an email from Victor's team. Contract draft V4, adjusted talking points. She highlights the lines that made her stomach sour. "I'm out," she writes. "My manager will scream. My agent will strategize. My mother will weep in cursive. I will survive." He replies with a thank you that feels both insufficient and reverent. Victor fires back by calling a board vote to review executive conduct. It is not about morality, it is about leverage. He floats the idea of suspending Julian pending an internal assessment, a phrase that smells like exile. One director, Soraya King, early investor, late patience, asks for numbers instead. "What does this circus cost?" she says. "And how much does the scholarship fund cover that press cannot?" Victor offers her a seat on a different committee. She declines and calls Beatrice. In the service world, Yara escalates. She assigns Mina to clean the chairman's private office at 2 a.m. alone, a job usually done by 2 people, and a sigh. Special trust, Yara says, letting the word trust do the labor of trap. Mr. Esteban hears and arranges for a new hire to shadow for training, which is janitor for witness. The office is a museum of decisions, glass desk, leather chairs, a portrait that thinks it can forgive. Mina cleans the fingerprints off power and watches herself not exist in the reflection. The way poor people learn to be ghosts so rich people feel supernatural. She finds a paperclip bent into a question mark under the blotter and pockets it for luck. At 3:11 a.m., the alarm chirps, a minor sound that means major interference. Security arrives with polite suspicion. There was a motion read by the censor, the guard says. You were in the restroom. Yara appears in a robe that performs surprise and says the words nobody like Mina can afford to be accused of missing ring. Security flips couch cushions and dignity. They stare at Mina's hands as if truth smears. She empties her pockets, gloves, the paperclip, a pouch of wipes. You can check my locker, she says. Steady. My bag, my shoes, not my body. The guard pauses and nods with respect that grew up working nights. They check. They find nothing because they planted nothing tonight. But the rumor will be useful in the morning. It is immediately. The next day's blind item reads, we hear a certain employee was caught in a compromising position with company property last night. Task. Mina reads it in the laundry room, surrounded by sheets that smell like someone else's rest. She doesn't throw her phone. She texts Beatrice with a summary and a calm that costs. Beatrice replies, occupational hazard, being inconveniently honest. I'm on it. Julian, pulled into a 10 a.m. meeting where the board tries to smile him into compliance, receives a single photo from Mr. Esteban, a blurry shot of a shadow in a hallway near Victor's office at 3:05. Too tall to be Mina, too broad, wrong shoes. Esteban captions it, new security hire, start date yesterday. No background check. We set the fuse, the lawyer texts. Don't light it, yet. Tease. The emotional weather worsens before the skies do. Mina's ex, Diego, a man whose best quality was leaving, slides into her messages with a butchered knight in shining armor routine. You need a real man to protect you, he writes. Unaware that the only real men she knows carry mops and lawsuits, she ignores him. He posts a photo of them from 2 summers ago and captions it, when she was mine, which is a sentence so stupid it should pay a fine. Beatrice dispatches a cease and desist that makes him delete his memory. Nico's violin teacher calls with good news. A scholarship audition opened up because someone got pneumonia and finally learned to listen to their lungs. The audition is in 4 days. The piece is hard, and the piano in the practice room is a brave little instrument that decides to be in tune if you ask softly. Mina rearranges shifts with the pleading efficiency of people who cannot afford favors. Yara says she'll consider it. The word consider, doing violence. Mr. Esteban finds a way. He swaps her to mornings and takes the graveyard. I nap like a cat, he says. You go hear a boy, make a room quiet. Meanwhile, Serafina becomes the unlikeliest ally. She posts a 3-paragraph note in a plain font on a white background. No emojis, no perfume. No woman should be asked to be a prop to stabilize a man's market value. I wish Julian well. I wish myself better. As for the staff who keep our rooms standing, you deserve raises, not rumors. She turns off comments. The internet, deprived of food, chews on its tongue. Victor calls her agent and threatens to call every brand that likes stars that behave. The agent replies, you are not the sky. Victor pivots to law. He files a motion to freeze the Hale Foundation Scholarship Fund pending an audit of fiduciary practices. He tells himself he's protecting legacy. He is holding a hostage. Julian calls Soraya king. He's using my mother's work to break my back, he says. Then walk with your back bent toward the judge. Soraya replies. Bring receipts and neighbors. Judges like neighbors. They bring neighbors. The hearing smells like coffee and fluorescent lights. The judge is a woman who has let no one interrupt her in 15 years. Victor's counsel is silk. Julian's counsel is a blade. Beatrice, whose name travels like a rumor among court clerks who appreciate neat filings, slides in with the storage room copies, the security hire roster, and a letter from Serafina's lawyer that tactfully calls the engagement draft non-compliant with basic human dignity. Nico sits in the second row in his good hoodie, clutching sheet music like a permission slip to the future. Mina testifies without adjectives, what she saw, what she didn't, what she cleaned off the desk, and what the alarm sounded like. Victor's counsel attempts to paint her as disgruntled, a word rich people use when poor people don't bow. Mina replies, I am tired, not disgruntled. The courtroom exhales a laugh it didn't plan. The judge denies Victor's motion with a paragraph that will be taped to 3 refrigerators by nightfall. Philanthropy is not leverage, she writes. It is obligation. Victor's jaw finds a new place to live. After on the courthouse steps, the press reconvenes its favorite sport. A microphone finds Mina's mouth. How does it feel to be at the center of all this? The reporter asks, her tone hungry. Mina looks at the sky, then at Nico, then at the camera. I'm not the center, she says. I'm the person in the room reminding everyone else to put the chairs back where they belong. The center should be kids getting scholarships on time. She walks away. The clip trends because decency is still occasionally contagious. Yara, cornered by decent weather, pivots. She pulls Mina aside near the staff lockers, lowers her voice to something that pretends to be human. They're going to come for you harder, she warns, and there is a hairline crack in her poise that suggests a younger version of herself in a different uniform. Make friends with the people who print the badges, she adds. It is a lifeline disguised as gossip. Mina files it under survival. The fuse reaches revelation faster than anyone wanted. Mr. Esteban calls at 1:13 a.m. with urgency in his whisper. He's doing it, he says. Victor's making the push. The push, a hastily announced artist fellowship live showcase at Hale Tower. Cameras invited. A soft reboot of the gala designed to bury refusal under spectacle. The fellowship committee email leaks. The showcase doubles as a contract signing event with Serafina's replacement, an actress hungrier for forgiveness than for art. The same email includes a service narrative bullet, capture candid footage of staff bonding with executives. It is a copy-paste of the memo Mina saw in storage. We starve the machine, Julian texts Mina. How? She replies, already lacing good shoes. By morning, the coalition looks like a neighborhood. Serafina, with her phone and her nerve. Soraya King, with a shareholder letter that carries weight without italics. Beatrice, with a packet that would make a printer blush. Mr. Esteban with keys. The piano tuner from Nico's community center with a tool roll and a moral. The custodian from Oak Ridge, with 3 neighbors and folded chairs. A sous chef from the gala with burn marks that say truth, and 2 of Hale's junior analysts who have been pretending spreadsheets are neutral and are done pretending. They don't storm Hale Tower, they schedule it. Soraya calls an extraordinary board session inside the showcase itself. Transparency is our brand, she tells Victor with a smile that would pass a metal detector. Cameras and board packets will share a room. The only thing that hates that more than a liar is a lazy lie. Mina returns to the penthouse not as a guest and not as prey. She returns as staff who knows the building's arteries. She checks exits, eyes sprinklers like old enemies, and finds the AV room door unlatched. Inside, a pile of service narrative cue cards with bullet points like, ask a staffer about their dreams, film their gratitude,
avoid specifics about pay. She takes one card and writes over it with a thick marker, "Pay them." Then film. She leaves it on top. The showcase begins with the false sweetness of staged spontaneity. The victor takes the mic and says words that have suffered under him before. Community, opportunity, family. A backup actress, Eloise, eyes sharp, jaw set, stands at stage left with a fixed smile. Mina can feel the trap under the carpet, the moment when Victor will pivot from fellowship to family announcement. On cue, he starts the turn. "We also want to share joy." Point of order, Soraya says from the front row, sharp enough to parry. She stands. "As a director, I'm calling an open session. We'll be taking questions about governance before any performances of love." The room's temperature changes. Victor looks like a man who just found out the river learned to run uphill. Beatrice, blessed dragon, takes the aisle with copies and receipts. "This is an engagement contract in everything but name," she says, holding up the draft. "This is a memo instructing employees to be props. This is a security roster that skips background checks. This is a log from a 305A Mia hallway. Here is a letter from a scholarship recipient whose check cleared on time, despite your attempted freeze. You say family, I say pattern." She hands stacks to the board like communion. Victor reaches for charm and finds none. "This is a circus," he says. "You're letting my son's midlife crisis rewrite corporate policy." "Your son is 31, Soraya replies. "His crisis is learning to differentiate spine from spinelessness." Laughter ripples in taboo waves. Eloise, the backup actress, lowers her smile a notch, which looks like mercy. Cameras drift toward Mina because the machine remembers where the story breathes. A producer whispers, "Can you stand by the window and look thoughtful?" Mina answers with a smile she learned at 17, harmless and edged. "I'm at work," she says. "Find a window that doesn't pay rent." Then comes the premeditated sting. Victor, never rehearsed losing the missing ring, reappears with documentation. Mr. Esteban, who insists on filing, produces a building intake form and a photo time-stamped 3:17 a.m. Security found the ring in a maintenance grate near the elevators. The new hire, the broad shadow, wrong shoes, signed the handoff and resigned. 2 hours later, with a forwarding address that points to a shell firm that once handled temporary stabilization for hail events. "You lost your prop and then tried to make a cleaner into a thief," Beatrice says, quiet with the fury of women who stopped apologizing years ago. The room inhales like a verdict preparing to be said out loud. Victor makes the only move left to men who mistake volume for truth. He raises his voice. "This company exists because I did what needed doing when soft people would have held hands." He shouts, dropping the veneer, revealing the engine. "We don't govern by comments. We govern by results. My son will marry a woman who can handle the stage this family lives on, and our staff will be treated with respect for as long as they stay in their lane." Mina finishes, not loudly, but with precision. The mic picks it up because mics love clean lines. Victor hears his father in his mouth and hates it too late. Serafina chooses her moment beautifully. She steps into frame without permission and says to Eloise, "You don't have to do this." Eloise, green, ambitious, afraid, blinks, and then to her own surprise nods. "I don't," she says, and walks off stage in a dress that will not be in the slideshow. A camera operator follows, then stops when Penelope Hale, silent until now, watching her husband become a history lesson, stands and says, "Enough." Her voice is a switch flipping. "Board, we vote now on 3 items. Dissolve any practice that converts relationships into PR instruments, codify a staff bill of dignity, and separate the foundation's governance from corporate leverage." She looks at Victor with a grief that isn't new, "and accept my resignation as chair." Soraya will take the gavel. The vote is not close. The cheer that follows isn't for spectacle. It is for someone finally reading a rule aloud that everyone pretended didn't need reading. Victor does not leave. Men like him never leave until escorted by consequences. But he sits, and in the sitting there is a small hard mercy. He will have to watch while the room he curated chooses better lighting. The showcase, robbed of its planned romance, becomes an actual fellowship evening. Artists perform. A poet reads a piece about mopping floors in hotels and finding 3 seconds of sky between beds. And Mina's throat does a thing she refuses to blame on dust. Nico plays his audition piece on the borrowed community center piano. The tuner, who came early to coax the instrument into virtue, wipes his eyes like a man whose job finally got applause. Afterward, in the backstage crush of chords and relief, Julian finds Mina in the shadow of a curtain that never learned to be honest. "I didn't ask," he says, remembering. "I know." He holds out his hand, not to pull her onto a stage she didn't choose, but to steady both of them where no camera points. "May I walk you home? You may carry the violin," she says, surrendering control in the only direction she will allow. He takes the case like it holds his resume. On the sidewalk outside Hale Tower, the air tastes like post-storm, clean and stunned. Serafina hugs Mina, quick and real. "If you ever want to change industries," she says, "I know a DP who likes filming women who tell the truth." Mina laughs. "I like floors," she says. "They always tell you where you stand." Serafina winks. "Keep making them tell the truth." Victor exits through a side door into a night that does not need him to name it. Penelope does not follow. She stands with Soraya, speaking in the shorthand of women who have decided to stop watering a plant that only grows poison. Mr. Esteban locks the AV room and pockets a key like a prayer. Yara, who played a part too long, sits on a crate backstage and stares at her hands. Mina sits beside her. "I thought being cruel was the only way to get promoted," Yara says without armor. "It is one way," Mina says. "There are others." Yara nods once, which is a lot. They make it to Oak Ridge without incident, which feels like a parade. In the small apartment, Mina places the violin on the table like a saint, boils water for tea, and stands at the window while the kettle makes promises. Julian leans on the wall with the posture of a man practicing smaller. "There's still a merger," he says, "because reality does not let itself be outvoted. There's still a father," Mina says, "because honesty refuses to get dressed up. There's still rent. There's still soup," he counters, a smile he earned, not bought. He pulls 2 bowls from a shopping bag like a magic trick. Lentils, lemon, cumin, a recipe Miss Esteban texted him at noon. He ladles carefully. "I will learn kitchens," he says. "I already know numbers. I suspect the former is the harder discipline." Nico stumbles out, hair in the shape of a question mark, points at Julian's sock, "Fancy stupid," and says, "Nice clouds." Julian laughs. "I will never recover." Nico grins. "Don't." The night ends without vows, which is the magic of a night like this. Mina washes bowls. Julian dries. The plant on the windowsill leans into streetlight like a woman leaning into a joke. Mina turns to him. "I will not be your rebellion," she says. "I won't be your story about rescuing yourself from your father." "I know," he answers. "I want to be your boring." She tries not to smile. She fails cleanly. "Earn it," she says. "Every day." "I have a spreadsheet," he says. "Trash it," she replies. "Start with soup." The next morning dawns like a dare. Victor releases a statement that uses words like reflect and heal and inadvertently. The board releases minutes that use words like adopted and prohibited and audit. The foundation releases grants that use words like now. The staff break room receives a new poster. Staff Bill of Dignity, printed in fonts that mean it, with lines about breaks that exist and cameras that don't, and pay that arrives. The memo reaches the sub-basement. Mina tapes it to the wall beside her photo of Nico, because sometimes paper is proof that tomorrow learns something. The city, which rewards endings with suspicion, waits for another shoe. There will be more shoes. There always are. But for a minute the building breathes. The maid keeps her job and her spine. The son keeps his refusal and finds it fits. The actress finds her line and delivers it off camera. The father finds, if not humility, then at least a chair. Outside, a bus roars, a kettle sings. A boy practices a run that used to feel like a mountain, and now feels like a start. Mina ties her scarf. Julian checks a schedule that includes a ridiculous appointment labeled, "Learn to sweep without moving dirt twice." He arrives at the service stairs with 2 thermoses in silence. She takes one in a breath. They climb. The day waits, hands on hips, unimpressed and rooting for them anyway. The day refuses to behave. Before lunch, Victor files for an emergency shareholder coup to reinstall himself as executive chair. For stability, moves to absorb the foundation for efficiency, and leaks a disciplinary review of Julian that reads like a sermon against treating a maid as a human. It lands on Mina's phone during a stairwell break. She lays the screen face down on the supply cart, writes, "Not the center" on a post-it, and finishes the flight because stairs don't clean themselves when men reinvent weather. Soraya calls an audible. The emergency meeting will not be held at Hale Tower, under Victor's cameras, but at City College in a scuffed auditorium with honest acoustics and terrible coffee. Penelope, silent since handing Soraya the gavel, texts 4 words that feel like a drum line: bring copies, wear flats. Counter moves pour out of Victor like cologne. A fixer corners Yara by the loading dock with a salary bump, a transfer to a hotel where clipboards still draw blood, and an NDA thick enough to bury the missing ring night beside complimentary mints. Yara carries the envelope into the janitor's closet, sets it on the lost and found shelf where people put things they wish they hadn't held, and finds Mina at the vending machine. "My apology won't be eloquent," she says, voice low and brave. "I forgot where my lane ends and my spine begins. Record me." Mina nods. The red light blinks. A woman who was weather becomes witness. By afternoon, the auditorium swells with a messy democracy. Investors in navy blazers, small holders with pens their grandkids gave them, employees who begged neighbors for childcare, fellowship artists in paint-splotched clothes, journalists who stopped pretending neutrality equals apathy. Victor takes the aisle with counsel, in a posture ironed by money. Julian sits with no tie, 2 thermoses. Habit travels, and Mina behind him between Mr. Esteban and Yara, the row smelling of lemon cleaner and bravery. Soraya opens not with violin strings but balance sheets. 3 items, she says. Leadership, a staff dignity firewall separating corporate from foundation, and a ban on using security and PR vendors to manage reputations. If you came for spectacle, you may be bored. Reform is boring, that's the point. Victor goes first. "We are hemorrhaging value," he says, projecting a stock chart without context, as if governance were a line wiggling politely. "My son jeopardized partnerships. Morale is low. We must reassert discipline." He references the gossip column without naming it, laundering slander through implication. Beatrice answers with receipts that could draw blood if paper were allowed. "We are hemorrhaging value because we used people as props," she says. Slides click by Shell vendor invoices for the dynamite, the new security roster with no background checks, the 3:05 a.m. hallway still, a memo titled "Service Narrative" that instructs executives to capture staff gratitude. She processes the room like a surgeon. Clean cuts, no theatrics, honest prognosis. Silence follows, the miracle where comprehension lives. Witnesses rise. Mr. Esteban speaks in the unembellished poetry. Janitors reserved for court, keys, closets, copies, dates. Yara reads her recorded statement, a brittle voice that warns as it keeps telling truth. Serafina live streams on the back wall from a plain kitchen and a plain top. "No woman should be asked to perfume a man's market value."
I wish Julian well. I wish myself better. For the staff who keep rooms standing, you deserve raises, not rumors. The junior analyst steps up, cheeks lit with fear and determination, and reads the line recommending labor origin optics. The piano tuner from Nico's community center, inexplicably perfect for this room, holds up his hands. I don't own stock, he says. I tune things. When you short kindness, wind knocks your papers into the river.
And then Penelope steps to the mic, holding a paper that looks small for what it carries. "You already have my resignation," she says. "This is my husband's last draft policy. Never adopted because grief made me stubborn in the wrong direction. He named it borrowed dignity. It forbids using philanthropy to lacquer corporate image and forbids using people's personal lives as PR instruments. He wrote it the night he almost asked a hotel maid to pose for a camera and stopped because she was blessedly busy. I forgot it existed. I'm ashamed of that. I ask you to adopt it now." She passes it to Soraya like a relay baton from a better past. Victor refuses to drown quietly. He plays his last strong card, letters of intent for a merger with a firm famous for slicing companies into money and leaving bone. "Debt has grammar," he says, eyes bright in that dangerous way. "You may think governance is a poem. It is math. Without this we fall." He pictures fear filling the room like water. Julian stands without mic or velvet and lets spreadsheets borrow his spine. "We are not soft," he says. "We are rigorous. Rigorous enough to disentangle my mother's scholarship fund from your temper. Rigorous enough to cost out the savings of not staging sprinklers and not hiring reputation laundries. Rigorous enough to choose a slower, cleaner path that makes us less famous and more solvent. If your model requires humiliation, your model is broken." The poet from the fellowship claps once. The room follows, not roaring but deciding. Soraya moves to a vote on leadership, and that's when the auditorium's lights die. A blackout swallows the ceiling. The mic coughs and gives up. For a blink, you can hear hearts adjust. Victor's counsel smiles in the dark. A power cut is a trick he understands. Then cheap brilliance saves everyone. Mr. Esteban produces a coil of orange extension cords like a magician, retrieves a dove. A dozen phones lift into the air, flashlights pointing at the dais. Someone yells, "We've got battery amps in the AV club." The campus techs roll in a rickety cart with a hum that sounds like hope. Soraya, saint of unflappable women, raises her voice without the mic. "We are not a power grid," she says. "We are a vote." Hands shoot up in the light of cheap LEDs. Paper ballots are birthed out of a box that once held recital programs. In the half-dark, democracy looks like a quilt. Victor scrambles for a different lever. Written consent, he barks to counsel. An attempt to race outside the room. To gather proxy votes by phone while the lights stutter. To overrule an inconvenient democracy. Soraya smiles the way women smile when they've anticipated a man's second mistake. "Already addressed," she says, holding up a new trust rider she filed that morning. Penelope's signature glittering like a verdict. The rider voids any proxies if a merger touches the foundation's firewall or violates borrowed dignity. It is a door quietly slammed while Victor slept. The lights return with a groan. The auditorium inhales relief, and because climax is greedy, it wants proof. Proof arrives walking, the new security hire, the broad-shouldered shadow from 3:05 a.m., escorted in by campus police, who didn't appreciate their door magnets being covered with tape. He looks at the room and calculates, poorly. Beatrice offers the path of least suffering and maximum record. "Confess or be famous," she says. He confesses not magnanimously, but thoroughly. Hired by the shell vendor, paid by a fund that loves volatility, told to find a ring he lost himself, promised a quiet bonus if Mina's name trended. He doesn't use the word sorry because the lesson hasn't reached his mouth yet. It doesn't matter. The record eats his story and digests it into policy. Votes are counted by hand, out loud, like hymns. Victor is removed. The foundation firewall stands. Staff dignity becomes ink on paper with teeth. Borrowed dignity is adopted unanimously. Merger talks are suspended pending a community impact review that will take months and require a heart. Victor does not disappear into a cartoon vanquishing. This isn't that story. He sits, a portrait unchosen, while the room he curated chooses better light. He signs something with a pen that finally weighs what it should. He leaves not to exile, but to a place where men who aren't in charge must live anyway. Later he will send a bouquet. Penelope disperses into 10 cheap vases so the flowers have to work. Outside under a sky, the color of metal, the city decants itself into the evening. Reporters hurry, neighbors linger. Mina turns, not toward cameras, but toward the people who chose boredom over blood. She finds Yara on the back steps, staring at her hands like instruments she hasn't been taught to play kindly. I used to think sharp was the only useful, Yara says. Turns out sharp was just fashionable. Mina bumps her shoulder, a communion more honest than bread. Now you teach, she says. Mr. Esteban hands Julian a folded bandana. For sweat, he grins. Leadership is janitorial. The machine tries one last time to make Mina content. A producer with good teeth asks her to stand by the window and look thoughtful. I'm on the clock, she says, and points him toward a set of folding chairs that need returning. He actually returns them. It's a day for miracles. There's one more impossible, inconvenient thing. Nico's scholarship audition, rescheduled twice by bureaucracy and storm, lands exactly now across town. Mina checks the time and feels that old poverty, math steal air. Do we race and risk or wait and regret? Julian reads her face like a ledger. He finally understands. Go, he says. I'll carry the violin. If we miss the bus, I'll run. Can you run in those shoes? She asks. I'll carry the shoes, he answers, and they're off. Down campus steps, across an intersection that only sort of believes in pedestrians, into a bus that arrives with the timing of angels who didn't clear it with scheduling. They make it as the pianist warms a stubborn instrument. Nico stands, bow shaking for one note, then learning its job. He plays like boys become men. A mistake early, a recovery brave enough to be beautiful, a last line held just long enough to say we earned this breath. Mina claps until her palms sting. Julian stays in the doorway, not wanting to alter gravity, and stares at a boy who will never know how much a city had to grow up so he could play that note. That night, a roof that used to host spectacles holds something else. A table without cameras, artists and janitors and board members who prefer minutes to memes. Soraya toasts with seltzer. Beatrice breaks a cookie in half like a sacrament. The poet recites 2 lines about cleaning a room so that a morning can fit. Serafina arrives in flats, laughs at nobody, and leaves early because her call time is 5 a.m. for an audition she will nail with honesty in her throat. Penelope closes her eyes and thanks a husband who got one policy right and a son who finally learned that love is governance. Mina doesn't become a brand ambassador, she becomes exactly what the building needs. Facilities Dignity Coordinator, a title that sounds like beige paint until the day someone tries to point a camera at a cleaner, and she says, no, with a badge and policy behind it. She negotiates hazard pay with Beatrice and a whistle-stop training for managers titled Don't Turn People into B-Roll. Yara moves into training too, teaching new supervisors to iron policies instead of people. Mr. Esteban drops a shift and picks up his granddaughter every Tuesday. They go fly a kite near the river and laugh at the wind's grammar. The prolonged part of the climax is paperwork and sweat. The staff bill of dignity appears in break rooms with fonts that mean it. The foundation firewall holds as boring, luminous minutes. The ordinance that protects people from retaliation for accidental notoriety gets a tedious amendment that makes it better. Mina sits for the whole hearing and applauds a comma. The shell vendor folds under audits. The volatility fund leaks members who prefer companies that don't set themselves on fire. Victor attends therapy, quietly, imperfectly, and for the first time in a long time, he says one true sentence to a woman who isn't paid to listen. I thought control was love. It doesn't trend, it matters. And then, only then, when boring has roots. When the plant on the sill has the audacity to keep living. When Nico's scholarship letter arrives with a stamp that didn't tremble. When the mother's library on the corner opens with a hand-painted sign that says borrow and a schedule listing resume. Help next to how to tell a doctor no. When soup has become not a symbol but a routine. Julian asks. It isn't fireworks. It's a Tuesday. He is drying a bowl he washed. Foreplay for a life. And he says into the quiet that has learned their names. May I ask you to be my partner on paper? Not for optics. Not for applause. A contract we write. Soup is non-negotiable. Asked for kisses only. No cameras near our joy. Rent gets paid before romance. Your brother's rehearsals outrank my meetings. And if I ever forget borrowed dignity, you get veto power over my calendar and my ego. She laughs once, the good kind. Add a clause, she says. You carry something heavy every day. Add one back, he counters. You tell me when I'm carrying it wrong. Deal, she says, and holds out her hand. He doesn't kneel. He doesn't borrow a chandelier. He produces a thin silver band simple enough to fit under a glove, sturdy enough to survive bleach. May I? He asks. You may ask, she says, and then she nods, and he slides it onto a finger that has lifted more than most promises ever will. Through the doorway, Nico saws 2 happy notes on his practice violin and yells, Soup, which is in this house, how you bless anything worth keeping. Morning returns at 4:58, like a friend who knows your door code. The stagecoach idles. Mina tapes a new rule to the dashboard in thick marker. No sad songs before the second stop, and labels it love. Julian salutes the law. The city yawns, steels itself, and tries again. At Hale Tower, a poster in the break room reads staff bill of dignity. No cameras without consent. Real breaks. Background checks before badges. Pay on time. Under it, in Mina's hand. You are not content. You are a person. Return yourself when done. At City Hall, a clerk stamps the foundation firewall amendments without fanfare, and goes back to her sandwich. At the library, called borrow, a mother learns the phrase, no, that billing code is wrong, and uses it the next day without shaking. At a small kitchen table, Victor stares at a policy called borrowed dignity, and tries to imagine who he would have been if he'd read it 10 years earlier. And somewhere between a lobby and a stairwell, between a storage closet and a board vote counted by phone lights, between a boy's first steady note and a woman's quiet, yes, a maid remains herself, a son becomes a man, an actress keeps her face, a mother keeps her leverage, a janitor keeps the receipts, and a city, so smug, so loud, learns a quieter sound. The exhale after you finally do the right, boring, beautiful thing. If you reach this ending, drop your rating from 0 to 10 in the comments and tell me which moment hit you hardest, and why.